Colonel Rob Maness has a lifelong record of providing dedicated service to this nation. Having worked his way up from the enlisted ranks to full colonel, he served our country for more than 32 years. He has served as a bomber squadron commander, bomb disposal technician, Joint Chiefs of Staff Operations Officer, assisted the National Security Team with the campaign plan for the global war on terrorism. He authored the first theater nuclear war plan and served as the Vice Commander of America's largest airborne intelligence wing. Colonel Rob Maness is a true American hero. This is Rob Maness Live.
What I will say is you had Bernie Sanders on talking about rule of law and criticizing the president at the same time where you're seeing this lawlessness taking place in California and the president sending in National Guards to stop it. You've seen ICE agents attacked. You've seen their cars put on fire, stones thrown at them. This is unacceptable. And you're also talking about enforcement of our immigration laws. The president, over the last 24 hours or last couple of days, about 118 individuals in Los Angeles, these were gang members, these were drug traffickers, human smugglers, people who committed robbery, child abuse, sex offense. The worst of the worst. These are not good people.
Are we sure that they weren't?
Well, that's what the reporting says. 118 individuals, and among them, I assume they were all criminals. It was only 118, but the bottom line is that's what his intent is, and that's what he's going after. And the fact that, look, we would not have this situation in Los Angeles if it were not that they had this sanctuary status that refuses cooperation with ICE agents. It makes it more dangerous for everyone, the agents and the community, when the ICE agents have to go in there and find these criminals instead of the city and state turning them over.
Welcome back to Training Tuesday. The Rob Maness Show is live on World YouTube and our X Spaces simulcast, while leading America forward with truth and principles. Can we really? As we observe and are impacted by highly organized, violent actors in our streets once again, many of us, especially those who have served this great nation for decades of our lives, are deciding to act so our grandchildren can inherit that country, not the one created by the biological warfare of COVID-19, the overreach of government that attacked our rights and censors us. We want them to have a nation that is so strong, the warfare you're seeing in the world break out today won't erupt. One where our adversaries won't ever dare, folks, to decide to fly drones and spy balloons over our critical military installations in our own country, a homeland where the people that live here and want to legally immigrate here love the principles we were founded upon and want to be a part of this wonderful experiment of liberty and prosperity instead of trying to destroy it. We are demanding a government that can be held accountable, especially at the highest levels in institutions like the United States military. One of those veterans who dedicated their lives to this country and the Constitution has a new book out. Yes, we are out here talking and writing, folks. And he addresses these very topics. My guest today is a friend of the show. He's senior geopolitical strategist, drone expert, author of this new book called Veritas Vincit. Let me interpret that for you in English since I don't speak Latin very well. Truth Prevails, a soldier's perspective on truth, faith, family, and freedom. He's a retired lieutenant colonel from the United States Army, a helicopter pilot, and his name is Darren Gobb. Lieutenant Colonel Gobb spent years of his life defending us and continues that service through working as a leader in the State Freedom Caucus movement and as an editor of multiple independent media outlets, and has made many media appearances on big networks like the Fox News and Newsmax networks. And Darren, welcome back to the Rob Maness Show, sir. I'm so excited that you're putting this book out, man.
Hey, Rob, I'm excited too because I'm done. I don't have to work on it anymore. This was not on the bucket list, but it ended up there anyways.
I'm working on one too, and I found myself in the same situation where you were. People were bugging me and have been bugging me for more than 10 years now to do it. and I finally did it. So I'm very happy for you because I'm not done.
The writing's the easy part.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about the book in the context of all the lunacy going on, obviously, through the video clips and all that. But I know the answer to this question, but the audience doesn't. What exactly inspired you to write this book, and why now?
Well, and by the way, June 15th is its release date, in case anybody's digging now. All they'll find is a Kindle edition on pre-order. And by the way, it's Father's Day selected for a reason. But ultimately, about 20 years ago or so, I had this idea of kind of writing a book. The title's been on my brain for that long. And of course, as a young captain, you think you know a fair amount. And as you grow, you realize how little you did know. So it's a good thing I never tried to write it then. And so much more has happened. But over the course of time, after retirement, people kept bugging me to write a book. And I just simply wouldn't write a biography. I was like, I'm not into that. I tend to have a problem with people who jump right into biographies and think that people want to read about their lives. It's just, I don't want to be in that arena. I wanted to be in the world of ideas and things like that. And so everything that basically took place from the COVID scam to the summer of love, all through the Biden administration, is the core behind this book. And although it addresses things that happened during that period and needs to have that context behind it, which I explained in the beginning, there are questions and ideas and thoughts throughout this, from the faith, family, freedom, leadership, military, geopolitics, all the above, that I ask. I think they're hard questions. I provide an answer or a perspective, and I welcome and relish the idea of many people taking a look and providing theirs as well, because it's all debatable, and that's fine.
Yeah. Do you think it's hard for most of us veterans to write a book about ourselves? I mean, the idea of a biography, I did the same thing as you. I put that aside and I said, no, that's not the right thing to do. And mainly because I don't really talking about myself.
Yeah, generally speaking, I think veterans still today don't like to necessarily talk about themselves and their stories and the things. They'd rather they elevate somebody else's story, and that's just our nature. If people are too eager to tell their story, advance themselves, I get a little concerned about their motives in the first place. So I do a 4-page bio at the beginning, just so people have a clue who I am and what I've done, just enough to hopefully establish a little bit of trust in a background. But again, no desire to go 280 pages rambling about how I ate mud as a kid or something. It's not important.
But it is important for me to ask this question because it's in the context of current events, and I know you saw this X post. I think you replied to it, maybe, or quote tweeted it. The one about the soldiers sleeping on the floor that the lefties are picking on the president about, and because shame on him, he couldn't even bring them beds and everything. What's the worst sleeping condition you had to endure in your military service?
Well, I'm a retired lieutenant colonel aviator, but I'll tell you, my life started as an 11 Bravo light infantryman enlisted. So I once slept on a rock in a swamp and woke up covered in ants. That's about as miserable as it gets.
That's pretty good. I was enlisted too. My worst was sleeping on a sand floor in the Egyptian desert and waking up with about 10 scorpions crawling on me. The little white ones, the glowy ones that scare the heck out of you.
If that was somewhere near Cairo West Air Base or something like that, I'm pretty sure I know where that is.
yeah, you probably do know where that is. So we're seeing these things that we'll see in the videos and we just saw a little bit of from Congressman Militakis there talking about what's going on in Los Angeles and California and everything. Is that lunacy part of what you talk about in the book and your viewpoint of it, or did it inspire you to write certain parts of the book a certain way?
Short answer is yes, but it was done initially as a word of warning to people, and I codified in writing what I've been telling people for years before this, and many of us have done this, is with the open border that just ultimately got cracked wide open under Biden. And it was always kind of open anyways. The implantation through that border of cartels, illegal aliens of all stripe, but specifically the cartels, the terror cells, and all this kind of stuff was a known entity. And part of what I wrote about and continue to write about is that we as America, despite the fact that Trump is president and other things might be looking a little bit on the upswing, those people are still all through the United States. We're seeing a little bit of what that looks like now, and our communities need to be ready for these kinds of riots and violence. Communities of all sizes, and they should have their own little neighborhood watches and things like that, because ultimately the police, even military forces, can get overwhelmed by 20 million people that came across the border, whether they're directly involved in this or just in some way supporting it. This is not the end of this. It's going to continue in some form, and that's kind of the word of warning in certain areas throughout the book. Is not only is, hey, this is coming, but here's what you can do to be ready for it as a community.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I noticed in the video clips coming out of LA, well, the first thing I noticed is that X platform was allowing independent journalists that are on the scene to show their videos without censorship on the platform. And that gave citizens the ability, and I'm kind of observing them write it out when I see what they write on things. It gave citizens the opportunity to hold that up against what the media like CNN and even Fox News is showing, and ABC, CBS, and NBC are talking about this, and just to show how silly the vaunted corporate press is in this country, as opposed to what these independents that are out there risking their necks, because they have to get up close. They don't have really long telephoto lens cameras and those kind of things. So they've got iPhones. Really, essentially, you got to get up there on it to get a good shot. And I think that's a good piece of news that's developed since Black Lives Matter. But the bad piece, Darren, and we'll talk about this in the next segment, and the shot the video clip that I show in the cold open will show some of this. The bad news is, since Black Lives Matter Summer of Love, the organizational resourcing, training, and tactics, techniques, and procedures appear to only have improved from what we're seeing, because there's a much more coordinated effort between the politicians' propaganda on the left, the NGOs, and I'm talking about all the way down to the city council level, from the governor to the city council in California, but not just the politicians' message, but it's coordinated with the message at the podiums and the message in the streets with the violent actors. And I'm not going to call them protesters. Those are not protesters that are out there conducting those violent actions. Those are direct action, violent actors that are being paid and trained by somebody. And that's what I'm concerned about, is that nothing in our government appears to have slowed down the development or stopped the development of these non-state actors that are capable of doing great harm to American citizens on the street. And I'm just talking random citizens, I mean, that's a lot of the people killed in the Black Lives Matter Summer of Love were just random people, like the former police chief in St. Louis that was looking out for a friend of his store just to keep people away from it. He was just a random guy on the sidewalk that somebody comes up and shoots. So we'll talk about that in the next segment here. We got to take a commercial break, and hopefully we'll get some hands from the audience and get some questions out here, because the book is fascinating, folks. It's timely and it's extremely important you get a copy of this thing. Veritas Vincent. Truth prevails. We'll be right back with Darren Goff.
Describe where it just feels like something's going to happen and you're waiting for it to happen. And you can look around, you see the National Guard in front of the federal building, but as far as this intersection where we're seeing all this take place, there's no local police to be seen.
Yeah.
And we have people handing out masks and gas masks, and we just saw people graffitiing the sidewalk right in front of this truck, and we've seen people doing burnouts in the street. There's no local law enforcement around.
Let us clarify, because we've been showing a wide shot and from a different angle, a whole lot of officers on the other side of the federal building, almost behind you, and perhaps the visual is obstructed from your point of view. But I can tell you there are many, many, many LAPD cars and officers there that have staged. They are blocking that freeway overpass, so protesters can't get on that overpass like they did yesterday and throw bricks or concrete or scooters down on law enforcement that was below that had cleared the 101 freeway. So perhaps they're not where you are, but there's a lot of them already positioned there. They're not getting caught off guard by a crowd gathered here.
So, I mean, that was quite a shot that we have there of these folks, and your photographer just gave us a great shot of the box that was left behind, which showed the brand of mask. I mean, it's not the kind of thing, thank you for seeing this there. It looks like a bionic shield is what that's called. I mean, that's not the kind of thing that you buy in bulk if you don't plan on doing something with it. And the fact that that's being handed out kind of like candy to everybody gives you an indication that these folks probably plan to be here for a while.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Training Tuesday, and we're learning about what's happening as we talk about our guest new book that's coming out June 15th. It's on Father's Day, the day after June 14th, Flag Day, and the 250th birthday of the United States Army, of which this man was a member, retired Lieutenant Colonel and helicopter pilot Darren Gobb. And Darren, I wanted to show that clip because it talks about the gas masks that you saw in the clip. You see the gas mask box of some sort of protective mask. I won't call it a directly gas mask, but it's a protective mask that has been delivered in bulk around the city to these actors, these violent actors that are doing these protests, mounting these tactics and these forces around federal buildings, because it's all about trying to stop ICE from rounding up people. And I have to be honest, folks, Secretary Noem said ICE has arrested more people each day ensuing since the first day of these fake protests than really direct actions against the feds than they did the first day. So every day it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and they're going after bad guys and everything, which is good news, but the organization, Darren, the resourcing, the training, you can spot the tactics. They'll pull park benches across the street and stop the police from moving and stop traffic from moving, so they can throw broken bricks and concrete blocks down from overpasses and break windows and really are hurting people and everything. I mean, This is more than just a bunch of NGOs, isn't it?
Oh, it's a lot more. Actually kind of went down the rabbit hole on this one a little bit last year and ended up publishing an article called The Festivals of Resistance, and I put it on my Substack. And it's there for a reason, because I started linking together all these different groups and said, listen, at the time I was making an argument that some of the greatest risk to our nation was actually between a Trump election victory and a Trump inauguration. That timeline can shift, but it's still the same risks, same people, same tactics. And it showed how these different organizations are collaborating together online, not only nationally, but internationally, because so many others are after us. It's not just a United States phenomenon at all. This is really a global phenomenon that's happening. And I told somebody yesterday that, some key words were, one, they're asking me, when does World War III start? I said, you've been in it for a few years now. You just haven't recognized it. And second of all, that LA is not a protest zone. It's not even a riot zone. It's a combat theater at this point, and needs to be treated as such. And somewhat jokingly, I think every single person arrested out there needs to be shipped to Alcatraz, and they can fend for themselves from there and build their own shelters, whatever it takes. This country means too much to people like us to let any of these people continue to live in peace, even on our dime in a prison. They need to go away.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the questions that you ask in the book is, does our current government deserve to continue on this path that it's on? When we're able to get a president elected that is putting a pretty solid team, at least at the top leadership positions, together for his cabinet and the departments and everything. When I see that, and then I see the actions that he's taking that are competent, that are constitutional, that are well thought out. For instance, the National Guard and the Marines discussion here. The National Guard's been federalized to protect federal buildings and law enforcement officers, and the Marines, the 700 Marines, have been sent in to help them until they can get more National Guard troops, and which is all perfectly legal, constitutional. It just shows competence because its timing is good. It's having a positive effect without them even getting into conflict and clashes directly with these people. So from that vein, when I ask myself your question that you asked, I go, well, yeah, if it's working the way it's supposed to work, and look, this constitutional republic we have isn't supposed to function efficiently, really, in my opinion, but certain parts of it are, and this piece of it right now in this time, I would answer that, well, yes, it does deserve to be able to continue that, but we know what the flip side of that is. We just went through it with Joe Biden.
That question was asked during the flip side, and I'm very happy to see, I guess the follow-on statement inside the book is that the greatest form of revolution is a complete electoral victory, and we get back on the path the Constitution requires for this nation and how we're supposed to be governed. And Article 1 of the U.S. Constitution, Article 4, Section 4 of the U.S. Constitution, every bit of it says exactly what is happening in California regarding the federalization of National Guard forces and the use of the active duty U.S. Marine Corps is completely within the bounds of being legal, because the Constitution is the primary law of the land. It doesn't matter what anybody else says. So does the current form? Hope it does. Hope it continues to improve, and we can keep going with electoral victories and keep moving the ball down the field in the direction more towards liberty, more towards limited government, and the way this nation is supposed to be run. But if we did flip that back again towards something like a Biden regime, it doesn't matter, of course, who wins, because they'll probably just break out the auto pen from storage again.
Right.
And if that happens, then no, that form of government has no right to exist underneath, because frankly, it's a different form of government than how this country is supposed to be run in the first place. That's why I asked the question. So if the answer is no, we should be able to articulate reasons why. And if the answer is yes, we should be able to do the same. And even if it's a yes, but good, positive movement, right direction. If it's no, well, what do you do about that?
Yeah, that gets me to another question that I wanted to ask you, but I got a hand up in the audience. I want to go ahead and take that real quick, and I'll hold my question to take this person from the audience. Shell is our host over there. Go ahead, Shell.
We have Colonel Gannon Burton, sir.
Yes. Hey, thank you. Could you address this idea that both parties are captured at the top, and we're kind of in this idea of a populist uprising against it, if that's the case, or just tell me I'm wrong? Thank you.
Great question. Part of that series of articles I pushed, and it's actually in that book, is one titled talking about the uniparty is the greatest threat to America today. And at the top, I mean, let's just say that the RNC in Washington, D.C., in my opinion, is not necessarily representative of the GOP nationally and at the local grassroots level, which I'm a part of, and that's fine. But painting people different colors in Washington, D.C., inside the Senate and the House, the whole thing's just a ridiculous dance most of the time. And it's this idea that Republicans and Democrats, they like to put a show on in front of all the rest of us and say, hey, I'm in opposition to you, and flip the script around. And in the end, they all seem to be in bed with each other, working towards the same ends, and none of it is very healthy. There are clearly some standouts who are not part of that equation, but they stand out for a reason, because they're rare. Once you get into the states, at the legislatures, things get a little bit more diffused, which by design, of course, that reduces risk. And then you get down into your grassroots central committees at the counties, where even I serve as a chair for the GOP here in Montana. You're going to get a mix of things and some very solid people, but they're getting frustrated because the Republican thing nationwide, specifically in D.C., it's hard to tell the difference between them and Democrats sometimes.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I found very quickly when I stepped into the political arena in 2013 at the U.S. Senate race level, is the uniparty. I used to say, look, I didn't fly over a red or blue America. I flew over red, white, and blue America when I was serving in the U.S. military. Mm-hmm. That distills it down to me, the idea that when I ran for office, I was running because of the principles in the Constitution and the values in the Declaration, and then I want those to be around for my grandchildren. And I want a country that's operated that way to be around for my grandchildren. It really didn't have anything to do with Republican or Democrat. I'm a Republican because it's the only party that's left that actually says, they don't always do, but says they support and defend the Constitution in their platform. And then it has actual platform planks about it and the Declaration values and those kind of things. The other party really doesn't anymore, but they both work together. The Republican version of big government is no better than the Democrat version of big government, is it?
Right, yeah. I was talking to a person yesterday. They were asking me about the riots. And I said the difference between Democrats and Republicans when it comes to these riots, this war zone in LA, is that Democrats pretend it's not happening. 75% of the Republicans pretend to care. Mm-hmm. And the 25%, of course, I think, you and I could put ourselves very easily in that is, we see the very clear and obvious problem, and we're willing to do the things it takes to fix it. And for those who know Dr. Alan Keyes, he had a very great comparison at one point when I was doing some work with him. He's like, the Democrat and Republican thing is kind of like watching Dancing with the Stars. Sometimes you have to oppose each other in order to extend the dance and be what it has to be, and sometimes you have to support each other. Either way, the whole thing's a show, and that's what gets everybody frustrated, is because all we really want is solutions. And like you said, we want to give something of the America we want to our kids, to our grandkids, and on down the line for generations, for however long God sees fit to leave us here.
Yeah, because the one that we see sometimes looks like it's trying to emerge is antithetical to everything that you and I served for and risked our lives and lost friends in support and defense of those concepts, the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence. So we got to take another break there. When we come back, I want to talk to you about drones because I skimmed your paper from your master's thesis at SAMS, and it was a long time ago, and I think we've got a failure of leadership on this, and I want to get your take on it. We'll be right back with author of a new book, Darren Gobb, retired U.S. Army.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. I want to thank you for all your support at wvwfoundation.com that helps make possible pushing out 24/7 content for free. Without your support, we'd have to put it all behind a paywall. But thanks to you and your support through our foundation, we're able to push it out for free as a broadcast service and broadcast ministry of WVW Foundation. Please consider going there and setting up an automatic monthly contribution, or go there and make an occasional contribution. If you prefer to support us through the mail, you'll find our mailing address there at wvwfoundation.com. You can also call and make your contribution over the phone by calling 901-825-0652. That's 901-825-0652. Again, all these details are available at wvwfoundation.com. Thank you for your support as we try to help people around the world understand the times through the lens of a Christian worldview.
Ukraine conducted a massive drone attack against Russian military bases dubbed Operation Spiderweb. These strikes hit targets deep inside the Russian territory, thousands of kilometers from the front lines, and destroyed Russian bombers worth at least $7 billion. Now, according to the Ukraine's security service, SBU, the operation itself was personally overseen by President Volodymyr Zelensky and executed by the SBU chief using FPV drones. So what exactly are FPV drones? FPV, or first person view drones, are smaller in size and have cameras built in the front which relays live video to the drone operator. This allows the operator to see what the drone sees, almost as if he is seated in the drone's cockpit. This enables precise flying and maneuverability by the operator from the remote location. These drones can be fitted with explosives, and the first-person view allows them to be smashed straight into enemy targets. Lately, Ukraine has turned FPV drones into powerful weapons in its fight against Russia. Now, according to reports, over two-thirds of the Russian tanks destroyed by Ukraine so far were hit by FPV drones. Given its efficacy, Ukraine is ramping up domestic production of FPV drones. Key Ukrainian producers include TAF, Viri, and Skyfall. The Ukrainian Defense Ministry had earlier also announced plans to buy 4.5 million FPV drones this year.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Training Tuesday, and we're talking with author of a brand new book that's going to come out June 16th, Veritas Vincent, Truth Prevails, retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel Darren Gobb. And Darren, amongst the many other things that you've done in your life, you're a graduate of SAMS, which is, to me, as an Air Force guy, we understand that the Army calls it the School for Jedi Knights there. But what got my attention on you, though, was as I've looked at this drone thing, and I wanted to show that clip because it shows the consequences of what can happen if we continue to ignore this threat in a way that it appears that, at least locally, domestically, we are ignoring it. But your paper, your thesis was about unmanned aerial vehicles and what it's doing and has done and was going to do to warfare in the 21st century, essentially. So my first question to you is, do you think U.S. military leaders listen to people like you that dove into this subject very deeply and wrote about it it was in 2011, I think May is when your paper was published. So 14 years ago. Do you think they have listened to folks and studied this issue enough, or are we in trouble?
Well, I guess the answer could be both. It depends on who the leader is. But Yeah, it's certainly interesting today to be constantly hearing from people about how, oh man, drones are going to decide the future battlefield and the threats to different things. And of course, I started that research 15 years ago, and so it's 2011 is the publication, but it was over a year of research. And by the way, 5 years before that of actually living in the environment of training people how to use them and a bunch of other things. So today it's more of a, I guess, seeing for real the anticipated threat that the paper lays out. It doesn't seem like enough listened. I'll put it that way. And the reason why I say that is because the three examples I gave in there about how to look at that threat was, first of all, China, peer-to-peer competitor, basically, industrial nation, large-scale conflicts, and how they would use drones to basically could use drones to overwhelm us, to make us spend ourselves into oblivion, and still be able to effectively counter much of what we do. Then I used Israel because they were really at the leading edge of a lot of this technology, and so that technology is going to proliferate, whether they like it or not. It's just the nature of how warfare has been through generations. No technology is new for long, and so you got to keep your edge. And then what's really important right now really is I talked about drug lords and narco terrorists and cartels on the southern border of the United States, how they're going to use them and what that threat means to the United States. And those are just three examples. You could find more, but 85 pages was enough, I think, to make the point. And I often find that the one place in the world you don't want to go to is foreign policy or defense industrial complex think tanks, because they don't do a lot of thinking.
Well, yeah, what got my attention was when the story broke last year, and I've done a couple of shows on this. I think you may have been one of my guests for part of them, is when I saw that the reporting that showed that 100 drones at night for 17 days in a row, and I think it was December of 2023, flew directly over Langley Air Force Base, Virginia's flight line every night. And the commander of Air Combat Command, the 4-star general, his deputies are all there. So you have more stars than you can shake a stick at there. The first fighter wing is there, which is the F-22 wing, which is our leading combat platform from a offensive counter air perspective, especially. I mean, it beats everything. Is there, and for 17 nights in a row, they ranged on that airfield unchallenged, uncontested, with the knowledge of the most senior leaders in Air Combat Command. They even set up lawn chairs on top of one of the buildings along with the wing commander to watch these things. And one of them was like 20 feet long, so the size of a Cessna almost. And nothing was done about it. That's what got my attention on this. And then you see this operation that the Ukrainians pulled off with mostly our help, I'm sure. And it seems like, well, yeah, we may be getting it right on the offensive side of it, but we're leaving ourselves defenseless, it looks like. And that just leads me to question: is our lack of holding our military leaders accountable over these past decades resulting in that consequence?
I think that's part of the consequence. We're perpetually fighting the last war, it seems like, right? It's Afghanistan was a refighting of Vietnam, but in the desert rather than the jungle. And so we never really got together the right people to take a look at what future warfare could look like. Because what I didn't really address in my thesis was, the advent of artificial intelligence and the speed by which it's coming along to help with the drone work, like identifying weak spots in a Russian bomber specifically from the drone and destroying the bomber. What does this? I mean, what does all this mean? It means that you can have a whole fleet of F-22s, and if they're on the ground and you got drones flying over, you've got an entire fleet of drones that costs less than 10% of one of those fighters. And that's just, I'm guessing at that point. But the whole point is something extremely cheap, off the shelf, can be very lethal, manufactured in a basement in some cases, 20 foot long. It's a little different, but still relative to the cost of an F-22. I mean, look, we're in a point of where we're spending ourselves into the ground against adversaries that are just going to go get drones and flood us with drones everywhere. We're not ready for that. We have some of the technology. The problem is where our spending priorities are misallocated, and we don't have enough of some of the technology that does work.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we've got some hands in the audience. Let's go ahead and take some questions from them. Go ahead, Shel.
We have cookies, sir.
Good afternoon. I have kind of two questions. Where do you see drones, the significance of the drone development in historical, for instance, we had the P-51 Mustang in World War II. That made a huge difference. But where do you see drones in their kind of status? And then where do you see drone use in, say, 20, 25, 30 years from now?
Yeah. That's actually, the great question. The master's thesis itself is titled The Children of Aphrodite. The reason why I picked that was because Aphrodite was a remote control World War II bomber that was an experiment. And so what I did was I took the progression of the advent of aviation, the Wright brothers moments, through World War I and up to about the Gulf War of 1991, overlaid that with drones and said, here is the comparison for how you're going to see drones grow over time. So if you go back to World War I, what were they? Underpowered, lightweight, able to drop single lightweight bombs, but primarily used for reconnaissance and counter reconnaissance, very limited in fuel capacity, endurance, and all these kinds of things. And you translate manned aviation from World War I into World War II with one of my favorite airplanes, the P-51 there, and the stark difference there, that's the same thing you're going to see in drones. They're going to grow from the lightweight, still underpowered recon, counter recon to what you're seeing now a little bit, which is growing into the World War II, post-World War II era, powerful, able to drop lots of munitions, or sometimes at least equally as lethal munitions, even if they're smaller and lightweight compared to World War II type of an environment. Going down the road another 20, 30 years, I think you're going to see is fleets of drones that can act and look like expensive fighter aircraft, like parked in Langley. They'll be, of course, unmanned, but they're all going to be networked together through computer systems, working in swarms, able to target that way. And if you take one out, well, they're cheap. It's okay. And they're expendable. They'll just put up another one. Tied to that, the last piece I'll say is, imagine China throws a fleet of drones at us and we expend the entire bunker of ammunition on a carrier battle group, for example. And behind that fleet of drones that you just eliminated comes their actual more lethal, more manned, more something else behind what they were willing to expend. Now we're out of ammo. That's part of the plan too, I think you're going to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And in your book, you write about the leadership challenges that military leaders today and in the future need to be able to face and handle. And the question is, do we, without us being able to hold the generals and the senior civilians in the Pentagon accountable, what are the things that people need to insist that their elected officials do and that their military uniform leaders display that gives them a renewed confidence and that America is going to be strong enough to deter countries like China? And we're going to get into China in the next segment too.
Yeah. Well, one of the challenges, of course, is we've got to get back into merit-based everything, and out of the world of just, I brought you on as a political favor because you did me a political favor. I want people who can go into an environment and be a disruptor, and in a positive way, disrupt the thinking, challenge the thinking, and take something to task and be willing to experiment and look further down the road than just the next budget cycle of Lockheed or something like that. And say, hey, you need to address the actual threat not spend so much time addressing how much money you want from Congress to fight the last war all over again. That's kind of important, I think. That's what we need to be demanding of people. And seeing people like Matt Lohmeyer going for a position as a vice chair of the Air Force, that's a positive trend. Stu Scheller overseeing the review of the Afghanistan debacle, that's a positive trend too. And even Pete Hegseth was a positive trend too. Long ways to go on all the above, but that's what we need them to do: is think bigger, think longer out into the future. That way, we're not blowing tons of money now on a war that will never be fought.
Absolutely. Well, we got to take our last break. When we come back, we'll see an opening clip with Kash Patel talking with Joe Rogan about the latest Chinese act of war against the United States. And this is going to shock you if you haven't heard about it and make you ask the question that I'm asking. If not now, when will we recognize in this government across the entire thing that the Chinese are at war with us? We'll be right back with Darren Gaub.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. Is the government tracking you? Do they have access to all your data? Well, if you go to worldviewtalk.com, you'll find out about a cell phone company that, does not store your data. They don't do that. This is what they're known for. They don't store your data. You have privacy. You're not being tracked. That's why a lot of folks are turning to worldviewtalk.com. You'll find their prices are very competitive. All the details are there at worldviewtalk.com. Again, worldviewtalk.com. Oh, while you're there, not only do they have cell phones that aren't tracking you, you can find out about how to get a satellite phone. Should the whole system go down and you want to communicate with a family member or loved one, you might want to have a satellite phone. Or how about their solar generators? They have great solar generators. Check them all out right now. Worldviewtalk.com. Worldviewtalk.com.
Ukraine conducted a massive drone attack.
That's the vulnerability that we have for being such a free society. It is. We allow foreign nationals to come in and go to universities and start and do research and become the head of these different departments, and they're constantly reporting back to the CCP or coordinating with them.
Yeah.
Or Russia.
Yeah. And they're not going to stop. That's the thing with these guys. It's just because you take one out, unless you take a whole of government approach, unless you get buy-in from the American public. And again, this is one of those things that you would think is a national security issue, right?
Yeah.
But they'll politicize it. They'll weaponize it. The Post will write about it one way, and it probably won't even make the headlines in a number of other outlets because they don't want to talk about that.
Has the New York Times written about this, Jamie?
I have no idea.
I mean, it seems like something that everybody should want to know about. If a foreign government, an adversary government, is trying to poison our food supply and human beings and affect the reproductive system, that seems like that's a bipartisan issue.
Yeah.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Training Tuesday, and we're talking with author and retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel Darren Gaub. His new book, Veritas Vincent, The Truth Prevails, about not just his life, but about questions that he has developed and asked to get and tried to get answers to, and has some answers to them throughout, especially the last few years in this country, so that we can leave our grandchildren a United States of America that's a constitutional republic underpinned by the values in the Declaration of Independence and everything that we hold dear. And Darren, that little clip there is recent. It's from Joe Rogan. It's Kash Patel talking about the fungus bioweapon that was being smuggled in. And before we went on the show, they had caught a third Chinese individual that had helped do the smuggling into the United States through research programs, university research programs. And when I saw that, the first report of it, on top of what we saw with COVID-19 and the Wuhan lab and those kind of things, I'm like, man, that's a bioweapon. And I also watch HBO and The Last of Us series that's going on there is a bioweapon fungus type development that gets into the plants and the trees and it becomes and starts being able to infect people. of course, and destroys crops, those kind of things. This is incredible. I mean, that's an act of war, isn't it?
Well, it is an act of war, and it's just another one of those things that you warn people about for years. And when it happens, all you can do is say, okay, now go from the warning to the here's what you're going to have to do about it moment once again. Same thing happened with the drones. It's like you get tired of getting out there and say, warning people about certain things. And sometimes it's due to a lack of outlets that, that word doesn't necessarily get out. That at the beginning of this show, that's one of the things you highlighted, the importance of the fact that since that Summer of Love, your show and so many other things that have grown up and sprouted and are, they're not accepting the fact that there's only a few main media outlets that you have to listen to. You got to listen to everything and figure out who's telling the truth and who's not, and go with the people who are telling the truth, because the truth is all that matters. And this is just another one of those cases. For example, the people I work with on a volunteer basis around the country, we submitted a 30-page report to Congress about the Chinese buying land, buying commodities, specifically around military bases. But it's not just the land, the surface, it's the mineral rights underneath, it's the commodities like lumber on top. And we showed how we used an example of Mississippi where one way or another, meaning either the Chinese own something directly or the Chinese own something through a surrogate, but be it a foreign nation or even through an American company, that they owned up to 70 to 75% really of Mississippi in some way or form. That's what really started that conversation nationally about their influence in that regard. But it goes beyond that. It's the Confucius Institute. It's the police stations. It's the simple fact they're here to conduct industrial espionage and take as many secrets as they can get. They don't copy well, but they do copy, and it saves them all a bunch of research and development time. China is not going to invade the west coast of the United States with an aircraft carrier. They've already invaded this for 30 years with an ideology that is more concerning than anything else they could launch.
Yeah, and this launch of the direct action forces out west in California right now, and I think they had some type of direct action in San Francisco last night, or it's planned for tonight through the Antifa branch of the paramilitary organization. A lot of those we've suspected for a long time that the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP, is operating at least in the background of that. And when you look at the videos, and you see not just the communist symbology, even the Soviet flag, but you also see the Islamist symbology, the Palestinian supporters, the Hamas Nazi supporters. That's all over these crowds and these professional-looking signs, the defensive personnel protective equipment that's being bought in mass, and the training that's going on. It's much, much more than NGOs. And, I'm a volunteer on a group called the Committee on the Present Danger of China. And we have issued report after report like you guys have and sent them to Congress. They've written books. And the question we're asking ourselves today is, if not now, when? Should Congress put us in a state of war? I mean, even the idea of doing a declaration of war or a declaration of Cold War is out there, because we have said that they were in a Cold War with us, but we had not been able to move the government or anybody in the government enough to put us on a footing that, like we were similar against the Soviet Union for many, many years. And that's a challenge, I think, that one of the things you talk about in your book is the geopolitical strategy for the future and those kind of things. And if we can't do that, what does that say about us? If we can't have the brightest minds outside of government and inside the government be able to get the government to acknowledge and put the country on the right footing so that we can defend ourselves without having to go to kinetic war, that's a major problem, isn't it?
It is a major problem. And unfortunately, it could also get us to the position where we have no choice and we're forced to be citizens defending ourselves. And that's not something we want to see on the streets of America by any stretch of the imagination. That's just that kind of is obviously the very worst case scenario. But We've been invaded. There's no other way to describe it. The proof I need has been seen in spades, and that's because NGOs, the United Nations, many others, moved these people through an old army base in Panama, up through Mexico into our southern border. They were well funded. They had a logistics plan. It was an operation. The only difference between a normal invasion and this one is because they came across not in a uniform, not in formations and units. They came across with families and kids and cartels and you name it, in civilian clothing. But it's the same thing. You basically have a million Trojan horses that just walked across the border during the Biden years, and they've been activated now, and we're beginning to see it as warned. It tells us that the lack of government response in many cases tells us that they are either complicit in some way, owned by the CCP in some manner, or that they just choose to be completely ignorant of the reality of what's going on around them. Both are dangerous. And that's why I want to get to merit on everything. It's your resume in politics doesn't seem to matter anymore. It's whether or not you're willing to be a part of the agenda that so many are advancing that's against the United States and our core interests for temporary gains in some cases, from former Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, down to city commissions.
Yeah, and one of the questions you asked, and this is why this gets to the core of why I wanted to do this segment in your book is, what do you do in case of economic collapse in the United States? Because with activity like this fungus, if it were to get out and destroy our food, which is also part of our energy, ethanol and those kind of things and biofuels that we produce, not in very large numbers, but it's enough to have an impact to drive us to have to make more regular gasoline without it, and those kind of things, which drives things and requires resources. What do you give people a taste of what you talk about how to be prepared for an economic collapse if God forbid it were to happen?
And this has actually been a fairly popular topic with a number of places I've traveled to and spoken. And I said, first of all, we don't want this to happen. Of course, we don't want this to happen. But if you go into this blindly without being ready, then, shame on us. And I would rather be ready and have nothing happen, and that's okay, than have the reverse. So what I teach people, basically, using my background as a former Army survival instructor and many other things along those lines, the pursuit of gold and silver and all this kind of stuff as an alternative currency is fine if you first address your immediate needs in that situation, which is, do you have food, water, shelter, medical supplies, and things that are unique to your family or individual needs on hand for at least 6 months, if not a whole lot longer. I'm sitting here with about 3 years of stuff. And I hope it's a wasted effort, completely useless and not ever needed. But in the event of an economic collapse, given the debt and everything else we've got going on, I think it's worth it to take a serious look at how we are positioned and say, okay, I've only got 2 days worth of food in my house. By the way, doing that kind of preparation, you don't have, you're not trying to build a militia of some sort here like people imagine in their minds.
Right.
If you have an earthquake and get cut off, if you have fires and get cut off, all of this is useful for that. People need to be thinking about, how do I get through the initial stages of a catastrophe to be able to survive for a period of time to the point where we can get back to self-sustaining again and then potentially rebuild a nation's economy? That's the long-range vision of the whole thing, but it starts by taking care of yourself and your family and then growing out from there into the community with those you trust.
Yeah, that's truly an American idea right there. We even wrote it down in the Bill of Rights with the Second Amendment and the First Amendment, freedom to gather and speak our mind, those kind of things. Well, tell folks where they can get the book on June 15th and where they can find you on social media.
On social media, I'm at DLGob on Twitter or X. The only social media I haven't been kicked off of, so I'm pretty easy to find on there. You can find me on Substack with the same title as the book, So I made it easy. And then the book itself will be on Amazon, Google Books, and Apple for sure, probably Barnes and Noble as we move forward as well. It's already on Amazon in Kindle format. And I think tonight, tomorrow, sometime it'll go on a pre-order status for paper and hardcover. So
fantastic, sir. Well, thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks for coming on, and we'll send people to it. Darren, we appreciate you. Tomorrow's Whistleblower Wednesday. Tim Jensen from Grunt Style. We're talking about veterans initiatives. But folks, June 14th, nokings.org, tens of thousands of these direct action events are going to be happening, even here in Gulfport, Mississippi at the federal courthouse. It's going to be happening. So be aware of your surroundings. Pay attention to what's going on. A lot of stuff. See you tomorrow.